format has got me throwing me. All right, it was on this date in 1904. 1904, that Topsy the elephant was electrocuted. Okay, think, wait a minute. Why is this a big deal? So Topsy the elephant was in a circus, okay, and was known as being a difficult elephant. Okay, but hard to train, hard to deal with. People were, wouldn't do what it was supposed to do. And so, as a publicity stunt, the owners of the circus thought, hey, let's electrocute this elephant. Okay, let's kill this elephant. Okay, and they were going to do this. And then the Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Animals got involved and said, no, you can't just electrocute an elephant. Okay, and they said, okay, well, what if we gave the elephant a bunch of drugs ahead of time and then electrocuted the elephant? And at that, the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals said, okay, then you can electrocute the elephant. Now, I didn't go to YouTube for this, but the thing about it is they did this and they filmed it. Okay, in 1904, you've got this silent film. Now, again, it's just, it's a silent film. It's, it's an old silent film. Basically, it's just of an elephant standing and then the elephant falls. But this was a huge deal at the time, and even now, that these people decided that it would be a great publicity stunt to literally kill an elephant on film. Okay, so if you ever want to know when did the movies go bad, okay, they've always been. Okay, it was on this date, 1904. Topsy the elephant was electrocuted. It was on this date in 1935. Some of you may remember this. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course. Bob Hope had his radio debut on this date in 1935. And then finally, in 1947, the last thing for today is that Peter Marshall was elected chaplain of the U.S. Senate. Peter Marshall elected chaplain of the U.S. Senate. He would be the chaplain for only 2 years. And then he died. And then his wife wrote a book about him called A Man Called Peter, which was made into a movie. Some of you may have seen or heard of that movie, A Man Called Peter. It's about Peter Marshall, chaplain of the U.S. Senate in 1947. That's it for today. So welcome to the first day of a new series, okay? And the series is, what I'm calling it, the Book a Week Bible Study. Book a Week Bible Study. And it's going to encompass a couple of different things. The whole goal is that we are going to literally go through the entire Bible in a year. Okay, how's that for ambitious, right? We are going to go through the whole Bible in a year. That means you too, Ed. So we're going to go through the whole Bible in a year. Okay, we're going to read through the Bible in a year. So I have two handouts for you today. First of all, I have the year-long handout. If we do more than one book, that's okay, because that's kind of what we're going to do. Now, this is our schedule. All right, so today it is going to be the most interesting discussion of the book of Leviticus in a single lesson that I bet any of you have ever had. Okay, how many of you have ever had a study on Leviticus? But so what I've got here is just so everybody is clear. So we know what we're doing here. If you look at it, all right. So we took at Leviticus. I've got your word count in the NIV text here. So in the book of Leviticus, there are 22,000 words. Okay. Now, according to, I don't have the source on here. According to a study of something like 86,000 people, 19 different studies covering 86,000 people, the average reading speed of an American is 238 words a minute. Okay, the average reading speed is 238 words a minute. So if you read it at the average reading speed, it would take you an hour and a half. See where it says reading time? 1.56. It will take you 1.56 hours to read it. And so what I'm asking for this purpose of this class, okay, is that you sit down for, if you can at all do this, sit down for 1.56 hours and read through the entire book of Leviticus. And then next week, we're going to read through Genesis, which has 35,000 words in the NIV. And it's going to take, at an average reading speed, 2.5 hours to get through. Okay, so block that out, sit down, read it. Okay, now, uh, what if you can I listen to it? Yes. According to a different study, the average read aloud speed is 183 words a minute. Okay, now I think that's a little fast. I think the average read aloud speed is a little slower than that. But you say, well, is reading aloud, listening to it, does that count? Yes, absolutely it counts. In fact, most of the original recipients of the Bible would have heard it. They would not have read it. Okay. The other advantage of reading it, of listening to it, now it will take longer, but the other advantage of listening to it is you won't be tempted to stop, pause. It'll force you through. Okay, it'll force you through the text. Okay, and my goal in you reading this is that you simply read the book. Okay, just read the book. Don't study the book. Don't stop every second you see an interesting passage and go, oh, I got to underline that. Oh, I got to write that in my journal. Oh, I got to check the cross reference on that. Okay, so to that extent, now some of us are going to be, and this is why my book is so big today. Some of us want to get this Bible, the NIV Study Bible, and go, okay, this is the one I'm going to read. Okay, which is it's got introductions, it's got cross references, it's got all kinds of notes and things like this. Okay, this is a great Bible. I bought it, I own it, I own 2 versions of it. Don't read this one. Okay, don't read this version of the Bible. Okay, why? Because every time you see these, what do? You're distracted. Oh, I want to see this. I want to see this. Oh, what is this? Where does this verse? Where have I heard that? Let me check the cross reference and go back to here. Okay, these are great. These are great tools, but they're going to defeat the purpose of reading the text. So one other option is a couple you could read. Now this is almost as big. This Bible. Now this is just an NIV. This is a journal. This is the one I use to teach out of. And you can see like when we're going through. So where did I had a text here. Like when we were going through Luke and Acts. Okay, so I'm writing down here. This is, if somebody 100 years from now looks at this and says, I can't imagine what this guy was doing. These are my teaching notes when I'm teaching through the book of Acts. So it doesn't like, oh, this really, that's make sure you point out this, make sure you point out that kind of thing. Okay, if you have a Bible like this, a journaling study Bible, it's just the NIV text. Okay, and if you want to write anything here on the side, you can. I'm not encouraging that. I know this might be a good die heretic moment because some people will tell you you should always have a pen in hand when reading the Bible. Has anybody ever heard that? You should always have note paper in hand. You should always be ready to take. I'm telling you, don't. Okay. In fact, you could go for something like this. Okay. See, because here's the thing: if I say I'm going to read the Bible through in a year or in a period of time, which one looks more ominous? This one or this one? Well, this one does because it's bigger. Okay. This one I got simply because I didn't want to get distracted. This is just an NIV. Okay. It's got the NIV text at the bottom, NIV translation notes at the bottom. But other than that, there's nothing in there. There's no commentary. It's just the text. Now, I take that back. There is still some commentary. Okay. When they give a title for the chapter, that's a commentary. How they arrange the verses is a commentary. How they, structure things is a commentary. Whether they make this prose and this poetry, that's a commentary. Whether they color, I don't think this is a red letter. Is this? I think yeah. Whether they make verses red or black is a commentary, but it's got minimal commentary to it. The less, the better, because I just want you to read the book. Another way to look at this is kind of the big picture. At the end of the year, I want everybody to be able to say, I understand how the books fit together. Okay. Here's another thing. Debbie came up with the idea. Okay. Debbie announced to me the other night that she's going to read it using the New Living Translation. The New Living Translation. This is a copy of the New Living Translation. Maybe get a different translation. Okay. The New Living Translation is an easier reading translation. Okay. So don't read the New American Standard Version, okay? Don't pick the King James Version. Pick an easy reading. Don't pick the ESV. These are not known for being easy reading, okay? The point here is easy reading. So the New Living Translation, if anybody wants to borrow this one, this is fine. This is one that came with my office. Okay, it's been sitting on my table upstairs. One of the reasons why I had to run upstairs was to get this. If anybody wants to borrow a New Living Translation, you're welcome to this one, okay? I'm using this one simply because this is the Bible I use to teach with, all right? So, again, the point is to just sit down and read through the book. Okay, don't, I'm just, again, there's we have this idea, we atomize the text. We say, oh, God is going to, give me a blessing from the word today. And I want you to get a blessing from your word. I really do. Okay. But a lot of times what we do is we say, I'm going to get a blessing. And God, show me something. And so you read until God shows you something, then you stop reading. Well, God showed me something. I'm going to stop at that point. Okay. I want you to read through the whole book. And so when you get done, you go, okay, I understand what Genesis is about. Okay, so that later on, when you can think back, you think, oh, there's something about that in Genesis, or that kind of ties in with one of the themes of Genesis. Okay, so does everybody understand? And then when you're done with the book itself, you just check the box off. Okay, and when the boxes are all checked off, then on the front page, you've read through the whole Testament. Okay, now we are not going to read the books in order. Obviously, we're starting with Leviticus. Okay, we're not reading the books in order. Okay, the books weren't written in order. Okay, the order that the books in the Bible is man-made. Somebody decided somewhere along the line that Genesis had to come first. And so now we think Genesis beginning, it has to come first. It doesn't. Okay, Genesis may not have been the first book written. Okay, Genesis may not be the oldest book. Okay, we're going to get to that when we talk about Job. Okay, so, and then especially in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, the order of the books is way off in terms of the order of when they were written. Okay, so the point is not that you start at Genesis and read through until you get to Revelation. The point is you read whatever this book is. Now, I'll leave it up to you whether you read beforehand or after. Okay, so for example, today, I'm fairly certain that only one of us has read the book of Leviticus already. That one of us is me. Okay, I will be reading them ahead of time. Okay, but if you want to come in, see Leviticus, get an understanding of what the book is about, and then go home and read it, that's fine. Okay, now on the front you've got the Old Testament, on the back you've got the New Testament. And for those that are interested, down at the bottom, there are a total of 727,000 words in the Bible in the NIV. If you were to sit down and listen to it start to finish, it would take you about 51 hours. Okay, so if you get like the audio Bible has a really good pure audio Bible, pure voice audio Bible. Just has a single reader reading through the text. Okay, but again, you're still getting a commentary when somebody reads it to you. Okay, just because people decide, okay, when somebody says that, are they excited or are they mad? Are they happy or are they upset? And how they read it is going to tell you that this reader thinks they're excited as opposed to being mad. Did Jesus weep because he was sad, or did Jesus weep because he was angry? Okay, in John 11. Okay, so a reader, when somebody reads that to you, he or she is going to say this or that. I'm going to pick one. So that's a commentary as well. You want to do a combination of both? Great. Okay, and then you'll notice that some weeks, like when we get to the week of August 30th, it's going to take you 0.12 hours to read the book of Malachi at an average reading speed. Okay, because Malachi is only 1,600 words. Okay, so that's about 8 minutes it's going to take you to read the book of Malachi at an average reading speed. Now, here's the thing. If you want to skip ahead and read Malachi and all these, that's fine. You can do that. Okay, there's no race. There's nothing magic about reading the Bible in a year. Okay, there's no command that you read the Bible in a year. It's a convenient way, convenient starting point to do that. Okay, so does everybody understand? And then I put out here, like it also has, the first 6 months of the year are pretty accurate. Okay, so for example, Debbie and I and Holly are going to be bailing out of here in January to go to the warm, sunny Philippines. Okay, it is warm and sunny, right? It is warm. Yeah, okay. I'm just checking. It better be, you know. Okay, for 2 weeks, so we won't have class that week. Or if we have class, the person won't be talking about a book of the Bible, unless I can arrange for somebody. That's an idea. I may do that. No, I'm just kidding. Not kidding. I might. But then others, like for example, Easter, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and then in the 16th of August, I said we're not going to, because Debbie and I are going on our 35th anniversary extravaganza. Details to be determined at this point. We're going somewhere. Haven't quite figured that out yet. But just go. Now, if you miss a day and can't get here, then down at the bottom, I have my YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and just type in @StanRay, you will get up that screen that I had up there earlier. Okay, and just to kind of go through that, you will get @StanRay, what I call it the train wreck of truth. This is my YouTube page. Okay, and there are 182 different videos for you to choose from on there already. So for example, if you go down to the playlists, you can see John, Isaiah, the book of Samuel, all of the episodes, all of the lessons from the book of Samuel. This is why I was setting up the camera all the time. I keep talking about it. There it is right there. Okay. So if you miss a week, okay, you say, oh, I can't be there. Well, you can go back and I'm just going to load these as I do them, or as I, like today, I'm going to go home, I'm going to arrange it, I'm going to, edit it, take out the jokes that don't work. So it sounds like I'm hysterical because everything I say, people die laughing at, or I'll just add a laugh track. I don't know, one of the two, and then I'll post it. Or at any point you can go back and say, I just read Leviticus, I couldn't get in it, and you can start at any time. Oh, I missed Leviticus. Okay, I can't get through Leviticus. Okay, start at Genesis. It doesn't, because then again, it's like if you start at Genesis and you go all the way through, and then you get down to here and you wait. All I have to do is read Genesis, and I'm done with the Old Testament. Well, then you're going to go back and read Genesis. And then you can go back, look at the video, and watch it there. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that? How this is going to work?
Okay. Are you doing that just to try and get more subscribers?
I'm sorry?
Are you doing that just to try and get more subscribers?
Am I doing that just to get more subscribers?
I see you only got 22. So.
Well, I do what I can. So, all right.
Like and share.
Yeah, like and share. Right. That's what you got to do. So, all right. So, any questions? All right, Leviticus. Okay. Leviticus. Why am I starting with Leviticus? I'm starting with Leviticus not because it's the first book, but because it's the book most often cited as the reason why people didn't make it through their Read Through the Bible in a Year program. So I figure start when the enthusiasm is high, read through Leviticus, and we're done. Now, it took me about an hour and 15 minutes to read through. I read fast. Okay, just warn you, I read much faster than most people do. Okay, but it took me about an hour and 15 minutes, and I was making notes on the side because I'm the teacher, and I'm thinking, oh, this is a great point. So let me pass this out.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And I'm going to try to put these on, with the answers on the website. We'll try and put these with the answers on the website as a PDF. All right, so Leviticus. Now, I'm going to start kind of getting some of the structure of how the class will go when we start talking about a book. Okay, so when we start talking about a book, we're going to talk about like what type of book is it, or the genre. Genre is an important concept. It's a very as far as understanding, because when you understand what kind of book it is, then you know what to do with it. Okay, so how does this apply to me today, or how do we take it, and as far as the instructions given. All right, so looking at this book, what kind of book is Leviticus? It is an instructional book. I'm calling it an instructional book, or it's a teaching book. Now, another way to look at this, and again, this is we start getting interesting. The last time I did this is the second time I've done this course, this project, I should say. I looked at used a book, and I'm going to talk about it a lot here, a book called The Literary Survey of the Old Testament, where it looked at the Pentateuch and said the Pentateuch was a single document. Okay, and each part of the Pentateuch, and the book titles that we have today are what's arbitrary. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so they looked at Leviticus as part of a bigger piece from Exodus through Numbers. Okay, so now we're going to look at Leviticus by itself, but some people look at Leviticus and say, well, that's part of a big that it's. So if you're in Exodus, the last half of Exodus talks about how to build a tabernacle. Okay, and then you go into Leviticus, and Leviticus starts talking about the tabernacle. Okay, so Leviticus follows, and so they said, we look at Leviticus, this is where the book starts. Well, somebody at one point said this is going to be the section of this book of the Pentateuch called Leviticus. Okay, so it's an instructional book, specifically talking about instructions regarding the tabernacle and many other things. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Who are the original readers? Post-Exodus Jews, okay, or the early followers of Judaism. Just put Jewish, just Jews. Just leave the, Jewish readers, people who believe the Jewish religion, kind of thing. Those are the original readers, pre-kingdom Jews. Okay, because again, the tabernacle. Okay, we don't have a temple until Solomon is around. Okay, so this is one of the ways when you start dating books, how do you know it was written before Solomon? Well, it doesn't talk about the temple. Okay, so it talks about the tabernacle, not the temple. All right. Who is the author? Well, the book of Leviticus itself has no authorship claim. Okay, it doesn't say anywhere in there that Moses or anyone else wrote it. Okay, there are some authorship claims in Exodus where the Lord says to Moses, write this down, or Moses wrote this down. There are some in Deuteronomy, but there aren't any authorship claims in Genesis or Leviticus. Okay, however, it's mostly Moses. Okay, I'm very strongly confident that it's mostly Moses. However, there were clearly other persons involved. Now, I say that because Moses writing the Pentateuch, and by the Pentateuch I mean the first 5 books of the Bible. I'll get to that in a second. But Moses writing the Pentateuch is not a hill to die on. Another opportunity for die heretic. Okay, so again, don't I watch a lot of different videos, on YouTube or TikTok or wherever you want to go. Where they talk about these different, people are, Christians say this, you have to have Moses as the writer of all of this. And no, you don't. Because clearly there are some things that Moses didn't write in the Pentateuch. Okay? I mean, you talk about there being a king in Israel. Okay, now I get it. God could have said to Moses, someday there's going to be a king, so write this as if, and that's a little weird. Okay? Moses is the source. Okay, this is what Moses taught. So when we talk about it being the book of Moses, that's fine. This was what Moses taught. Somebody wrote down what Moses taught. It's Moses' teachings. But Moses may not have been the person who picked up the pen and wrote it. Does that make sense? Okay. In addition, I don't believe, and I don't think any scholar believes, that Moses sat down one day and said, all right, I need to summarize all of this. So I'm going to start with Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, et cetera, and just, okay, done with Genesis, let's do Exodus. No, okay, done with Exodus, let's do Leviticus. Done with Leviticus, let's do Numbers. Okay, that it wasn't written in that order. Okay, so some have argued that Leviticus is the first of the Pentateuch books to be written, because it was the one with the instructions, and that Genesis was the last. Okay, because you got all these rules, and somebody said, hey, we need to put together the things Moses said about the text, or how we got here. Okay, and so somebody said, all right, let's put Genesis together. Let's include all the accounts, and when we get to Genesis, we'll talk about that. Okay, so there were clearly other persons involved. So it's interesting. There are, as you read through Leviticus, there are sections where, let me see if I can find it here. We're talking about some of the offerings that are made, and as we talk about the offerings, let me see if I can find the passage. Should have written it down, but I should have made a note of it. So in chapter 3, as you read through talking about the fellowship offering, okay, he's giving instructions like verse 3, chapter 3, verse 2. You are to lay your hand on top of the offering and slaughter it at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons, the priest, shall splash this on. Verse 5, then Aaron's sons. Then later on, verse 13, then Aaron's sons, etc. Then at the end it says, then Aaron's sons will do this, that, and the other. So we talk about it's always Aaron's sons, or Aaron and his sons, Aaron and the priest. Okay, discussing that sacrifice. Then the next sacrifice, the sin sacrifice, chapter 4, okay, the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, in verse 3, if the anointed priest sins, and it's all talking about the anointed priest, not Aaron's sons. Okay, so different sacrifice. This one is an anointed priest. This one talks about an anointed priest. This one is talking about Aaron and his sons. Well, the priests were all supposed to be descendants of Aaron. But at one point, somebody, when they were writing it down, said, okay, decided to emphasize that it was Aaron's sons. Next one, it's the priests. It's just the anointed priest. Okay? So again, that suggests, now it could be that, okay, at this point, Moses said this one has to be one of Aaron's sons. And this, you could argue that. Or you could just say that this is when somebody wrote this list of instructions of what Moses had said, it's a different person, and they just point out it's the anointed priest as opposed to Aaron's sons. Okay, so it's kind of two different ways to refer to the same group. Okay, so you ever have a thing where one person refers to, when I first got my driver's license, I had to go visit my sister in Chicago. She lived in Chicago at the time, Marquette Park area. And my dad gave me instructions on how to get there. And he said, well, you go to Route 55 and you get off on Crawford. And you go down Crawford. Okay, now my dad grew up in Chicago. And he said, you go to 55 and you get off on Crawford. And then you go down to 63rd Street, make a left, and into where your sister lives. Okay. So I get in the car and I drive looking for Crawford. I can't find it. So I got off on a street, and I just coincidence, got off on Pulaski. Because something told me she lived around Pulaski. I'd heard Pulaski, so I got off on Pulaski, and I thought, okay, maybe it's this way and something. I'm looking for Crawford Cross Street. So I'm on Pulaski looking for Crawford. So finally, again, just for the record, being male, I stopped to ask for directions. Okay. I know. I've never let that mistake happen again. But I was there because I had asked for directions. But regardless, so I went into this gas station on Pulaski, and I told the guy, remember when you used to have to go to gas stations to ask for directions? Okay, here's my people. We know that stuff, right? Say that. Go suggest that to Pastor Jared. You have no idea what you're talking about. Why on earth would you go to a gas station and ask for directions? Because that's what you did. Okay. So I went into this gas station to ask for directions, and the person just looked at me kind of funny. for those, and this is one of those if you know, you know kind of thing. He says, well, it's right there. I'm like, what do you mean it's right there? That's Pulaski. It's like Crawford and Pulaski are the same street. Oh, well, nobody told me that. So people of a certain age would get on that street and would call it Crawford. People of a different age would call it Pulaski. Okay, so again, people of a certain age, when they were talking about priestly duties, they would refer to Aaron and his sons. People of a different age would look at those same duties and refer to the anointed priests. Okay, so again, same truth, same street, same people, just two different sources or different people referring to how Moses had taught them. Again, the source is Moses. Okay, these are the books of Moses. Okay, so I'm not saying Moses didn't do it. I'm not falling into the JEPD theory, the documentary hypothesis look of it. Okay, just kind of different ideas there. Okay, it's part of the Pentateuch. Okay, should have led with this in hindsight, but it was part of the Pentateuch. Pentateuch, Pentateuch, which means 5-part work. That's all it means. Okay, 5-part work. So Pentateuch basically means 5 books, the 5 books. Okay. Now Jewish readers would refer to this as the Torah or the law. Now the interesting story is there's a development of how the that by the time of the New Testament, when the Jewish leaders would be talking about the law, they're talking about the Pentateuch. But earlier, when they talked about the law, was specifically Deuteronomy, not necessarily all of the law. It just, as time went on, it became larger and larger. Okay, but whatever. So depending on when, so if you talk to a Jew around 800 BC and he or she was talking about the law, they would probably be talking about Deuteronomy, what we call Deuteronomy. Now, if you talk to a Jew around the time of Christ and said, what is the law? He or she would have said the first 5 books of the Bible. Because again, this kind of changed. All right. Just like when you were talking to the Apostle Paul and you say, what are the scriptures? He would have said what we call the Old Testament. He wouldn't have said what we call the New Testament because they didn't exist, right? Okay, so it's part of the Pentateuch. When was it written? Well, it depends on how you look at it. I think the original source material was created around 1300 BC. Okay, just after the Exodus. Okay, but was not fully compiled, put together until 700 or 800 years later. And by that, because again, this is why they would have said, okay, there's the law, which is Deuteronomy. But by the time of the Babylonian captivity, and again, the Babylonian captivity was a serious time for the Jewish religion. They really solidified, coalesced, and created the Judaism of the New Testament that Jesus was dealing with. So the Judaism of the New Testament was not as coherent, or was much more coherent or cohesive than it was in, say, the kingdom days. Because they sat down at the captivity and said, okay, let's put this all together. And they put together the 5 books and said, all right, we've got the law, kind of thing. All right. Not fully compiled. It existed. It existed. It was all there. It just wasn't put together as 5 books until 600 or 700 years later. Just like the New Testament existed, the books of the New Testament existed at the end of the 1st century, but they weren't put together or identified as being a coherent set of books until 200 years later, like 300, 327, 375, somewhere in there, AD. All right. What does the title mean? Leviticus. Now, honestly, this is one of those duh moments for me. I will confess. It was. I've gone through this. I've talked about the book of Leviticus before, but I never really thought about the title of the book, Leviticus. Okay, what does Leviticus mean? What does that mean? And it actually derives from the Hebrew meaning instructions given to the Levites. Instructions given to the Levites. The Levites were the family, the tribe that was supposed to take care of the temple, the tabernacle. Okay, the worship sites, or the worship practices. That's what it is. So again, in Hebrew, oftentimes this is just referred to as the book of instruction. Okay, so we call it Leviticus. All right, basically, what's the book about? And again, the book answers the question, how does a sinful people deal with a holy God living in their midst? Now, is this a question that we still have to ask ourselves today? Yes. Okay, if you're a believer and you believe that the Holy Spirit indwells you and that the Holy Spirit is one of the three Godheads, persons of the Godhead, then you still are dealing with this question of how do I, a sinful person, deal with a holy God living within me? Okay, so that's the question that's being answered here in the book of Leviticus. So if we look at the book of Leviticus and we say, oh, well, that doesn't apply to me, or I can't learn anything from that. Well, have we answered this question? Does anybody really have a lock on this question? Well, we don't. It's part of the struggle of living kind of thing. Okay, so this is why the book of Leviticus, why does it matter, the book of Leviticus? It's a hard book to say several times. How does this book relate to today? It emphasizes the need for holiness, the need for separation, and it gives you an idea of what does a holy God expect of his people. Okay, so when we get through the book of Leviticus and we read these things, it's not enough to be a staunch dispensationalist and say, well, that's Leviticus, it doesn't apply to us. It's like, no, this is telling you what a holy God expects his people to do. Period. Okay, are we God's people today? If you're a believer, are you one of God's people? Is the church God's people? Yes. Is it God's nation? Being a dispensationalist? No, that's Israel, but we're still God's people. Does this apply to us? Yes. What God expected of his people in the wilderness is what God expects of his people in terms of holiness and separation. Now, if you looked at the outline that they give was what we've talked about this before. It's a chiastic structure. Okay, it's a chiastic structure. And the point of the chiastic structure, and I said it before, and this kind of illustrates it, the point of a chiastic structure, or a chiasma, is the central item. Okay, and that is the Day of Atonement. Okay, so everything about the book of Leviticus leads up to the Day of Atonement and derives from the Day of Atonement. Okay, so you have, now they call it, to me, I've got it A, B, C, D, A prime, B prime, C prime. That's how you would organize a chiastic structure. Okay, so you see A, the ritual sacrifices, B, points about the priests, ritual purity, Day of Atonement, moral purity, priest qualifications, and the 7 feasts. Okay, and these, again, they illustrate very well how they relate to each other. Okay, and the last one, the coda, is the coda, that little, what I'm calling a coda. They call it, I think, an afterword. It's called the faithfulness here. Okay. Now the NIV Study Bible just gives it a 2-part. Says the NIV Study Bible says, well, the book of Leviticus very naturally falls into 2 categories: instructions to the laws of the tabernacle, and then the laws of the community, kind of thing. Okay, but they both end with the NIV Study Bible says the laws of the community. What draws these 2 things together is the Day of Atonement, kind of thing. Okay, the Day of Atonement. So what are some of the themes that are in here? There's I've got at least 4 themes that I thought were interesting. Number 1 is holiness. Holiness. Okay, the book of Leviticus talks about holiness. Okay, it says. There's a lot of interesting things. It says, be holy, for I am holy. I, the Lord your God, said this. Okay. Be holy. Why do you need to be different? Because I'm holy. And holy just means other. It means separate. Okay. So again, God's definition of being holy means be separate. He's telling them, be different, be separate. So when Paul says in 1 Corinthians, come out from among them and be separate, is he really saying anything new? No. Okay, this is something that has gone on. Again, it's like when Pastor Jarrett was talking this morning about, I wonder if Jesus was thinking about Psalm 65. I'm thinking, was Paul thinking about Leviticus when he wrote, come out from among them? In fact, if you read through Leviticus, when you read through Leviticus, what'll happen, what should happen, what I think has happened, is, Leviticus is like I'm going to call it, no, it's like part one of the story, and we've only read part two. Now, earlier when our kids were younger, we were talking about having them watch a movie that had a series. There was a series of these movies, and we wanted them to wanted to know if their friends had seen this original movie. Okay, have you seen part one? The original movie. And several of his friends had said at the time, said, "Oh no, well I saw part two and part three, but I haven't seen part one." Several of his friends. And I just remember thinking, how can you watch part two of a movie without watching part one of the film? Okay. And yet, I mean, if you watch any sequel to a movie, they always put enough they always understand it. They always structure it in a way that somebody who hasn't watched part one can enjoy part two. Okay. And so I was just like, how on earth can you watch part two without watching part one? And yet people do it. Okay. And here we talk about some of the things in the New Testament. Oh, Jesus says this, Jesus said that to the people. And yet we're like, we just go to our study Bible, and the study Bible says, oh, there's a verse here, and we kind of read the one verse. We flip back. Oh yeah, Leviticus chapter 14 verse 2 says this. Oh, okay. Whereas here we can see the this is like part one. When Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, this is what he's talking about. This, the Pentateuch. This is what he's talking about. This is what he's referring back to. Okay, this is why it's important. He talks about holiness. He talks, and holiness in a lot of ways. And one of the things I'm putting this under holiness, but in chapter 4, when talking about the different offerings, he talks a lot about sinning unintentionally, kind of thing. And that was easier to do then than it is now, I think, because there were a lot of physical things that you needed to do. You needed to participate in this offering in this way. There were some very specific things you needed to do, and at very specific times you needed to do them. And if for whatever reason you didn't do them, that by definition was sinning. And even if you had a really good reason for not being there, that was still considered a sin. And so you could be, oh, I didn't realize, I had no idea I did that. I don't know, maybe once or twice in your life, you have done something, you have offended somebody, and you had no idea that you had done it. Anybody ever had that happen to you? Somebody's mad at you. Why are you mad at me? Well, you didn't do this. And you're like, I have no idea that I was supposed to do that. Does that make the person less mad? No. I mean, they're still aggrieved. So you end up apologizing. I'm so sorry. If you really want to repair the relationship, oh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I didn't realize this. I'm sorry. Please forgive me, kind of thing. Had no idea. So you could sin unintentionally, and they kind of expect it to the point of where, again, if you look at chapter 4, it says, the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, when anyone sins unintentionally. And then in verse 13, if the whole Israelite community sins unintentionally. And then in verse 5, if any member of the community sins unintentionally. And then in chapter 5, if anyone sins because, I'm sorry, that's a different passage. And so talking about this importance of being holy goes beyond simply confessing the sins is making sure that you have taken care of these things that are unintentional. If you look at Matthew chapter 18, we talk about Matthew chapter 18, that's the passage where, how you deal with conflict. Okay, and it's interesting, and most people don't. Let me just go back to the passage because I want to make sure I read it correctly. That's always a good thing, instead of just making up the talking about dealing with, let's see, dealing with sin, parable. Your brother or sister sins, go and point out just for so in verse 15, it says, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault. This is how the NIV translates it. The King James translated it something, if anyone has aught against you, kind of thing. So this is, if you think about Matthew 18, you're not talking about how do you deal with sin in your life. So how, it's saying, listen, people might be sinning unintentionally. Go out and deal with that. Or if anyone has aught against you, the way the King James translates it. Again, you may not, if somebody's mad at you and you have no idea why this person is mad at you, okay, then it's like, this is for you. Go find out why. Which is not, how many of you have ever had somebody you think mad at you? Now, of course, this has never happened to me. Never. Somebody's mad at you and you know that person is mad at you, or angry at you for something. I find as a principal, happens all the time. Okay, why? Right? It happens yeah. So and so is really furious, isn't talking to you, and somebody says, so and so is mad at you. Really? Why? What did I do? You have no idea. And there's a temptation to say, well, you know what? Hey, they know where my office is. They can come talk to me, and you can do that. I mean, it's not really good principling, is it? No. Joe was a principal for many years. It's not really good principling. It's tempting. It's fun to sit there and go, yeah, well, if they want to come find me. The good principal goes out and says, hey, Marty, what's up? What's going on? Why? What did I do? What's the problem here? Kind of getting it up here. But it says be different. Repeated themes. Holiness, be different. Okay. And it says go out. I didn't in my haste. I didn't write out the verses. Thought I underlined them. We talked about being different. He says, I come out where Paul says, come out from among them and be different. He says, I called you to be different. That people are going to look at Israel, look at my people, and think there's something different about them. Okay, and Leviticus emphasizes this point. Okay, it's repeated over and over. Another thing that he talks about over and over and over again: don't eat blood. Okay, over and over again, like 7 times. There's don't eat blood. Whatever you do, don't eat blood. Don't eat blood. Don't eat blood. Now, why does that matter? Well, in Acts chapter 15, at the Council of Jerusalem, when we're talking about how the church, the Gentiles can come into the church, what does that first church council say? Well, okay, what do they really don't need to follow the law, but you know what? Don't eat blood. Don't eat blood. This is just something that is a deal breaker here. Okay, don't eat blood. And then love your neighbor. In chapter 19, Leviticus, and I'm going to close with this, Leviticus 19. Well, there's a lot of other things here, like in Leviticus 19, beginning with verse 9. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time, or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. Okay, so where does that come back? Ruth and Boaz. Okay, so that story. And then even in the New Testament, where Jesus' disciples are gleaning in the field, kind of thing. In verse 15, he's just kind of rephrasing the law here in this part. But verse 15, do not pervert justice, do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Okay, and then the verse that really struck out to me, and I've got it down at the bottom here, verse 18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. That sound familiar? So when people say in the New Testament, what's the greatest commandment? Jesus says the obvious one, love the Lord your God with Deuteronomy 6, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, right? And then he says, but the second is like it, Leviticus chapter 19, love your neighbor as yourself. So reading through Leviticus is like reading part one of a lot of what happens in the New Testament kind of thing. And the final thought is on Leviticus. Well, there are a couple of problems. One problem in particular. It's a long discussion on how slavery is supposed to work. Okay, that's sort of problematic. Okay, so again, that's an issue today where people say, well, the Bible teaches it's okay to have slaves. Well, in the Old Testament it does. Now there's arguments, but here it is. You can't take another Israelite as a slave, but you can take somebody you conquer, but then there's different rules and regulations and all of that. So it's, again, I've seen a lot of videos where people are like, if you come out and say, well, the Bible doesn't approve of slavery. Okay, you got to be a little more nuanced than that. So that is one issue that comes. Leviticus it's not that hard a book to read. I say that having just sat down and read it. Again, especially if you know the New Testament, you see that, oh yeah, that's here. Okay. Any questions? Now, see, if you read it ahead of time, this is the thing. If you read it ahead of time, then we can go, oh, I read this. What do you think of that? Then that's the book club version of it. I always thought that would be kind of fun to do, like a Bible book club, rather than read a novel. You just, okay, we're going to read Luke, and we're going to come in and we're going to talk about it like you talk about a book at a book club. How many of you have never been to a book club? Anyone ever been to a book club? Oh, so you guys are missing it, kind of thing. Debbie is part of a couple of book clubs, actually, multiple book clubs. One I've been to several times. One I keep threatening to show up at, because I think it'd be kind of fun for me to show up at the ladies' book club here and say, hey, if you read the book, I read the book. But people just start talking about the book. Pardon me? It's okay. All right. Well, there you go. Karen said I can come. So, but be that as it may, Leviticus again. It's not that hard. It's not that hard to read. It isn't. It's kind of interesting, and especially if you're not. Again, don't overthink the project. Does that make sense? Don't sit down and think, okay, I got to study this. You're not studying it. You're just reading it. Okay? You're not memorizing it. You're just reading it. You're not I believe that God said that His word is not going to come back to Him void. But I'm not saying don't go into this and say, God, you need to bless me from this. I need to see something that I can use in my life today. Okay, that's great. You're just reading the text. Yes.
You mentioned the literary survey of the Old Testament. Whose is that?
Well, by literary, I just mean the big picture, looking at the books and how the books fit together. I'm not looking at literary. And I realized after I wrote that I had talked about literary being a modern kind of analysis.
You're not reading a specific text. You mentioned the book that you used the last time you did this series.
Oh, well, I've got a couple of different books that I'm using. One of them is, I'll bring them next week because my son has one of them, a literary history of the Old Testament, or a literary analysis of the Old Testament, where the author, and I forget the name of it, I'll bring it next week. And then John Walton's two different Bible survey books. And then I have the NIV Study Bible as far as introduction. And then I also have Geisler's introduction to the New Testament. So basically, it's if you're looking for the kind of information, if you look at a book that says New Testament introduction or Old Testament introduction, that's the kind of thing we're talking about, the literary usage of the books. So next week, we're going to talk about Genesis, because that's the first book of the Bible. Then we're going to talk about Job, and I'll talk about why are we talking about Job after Genesis. Then we're going to get back into the Pentateuch, Exodus, looking at the. Then we're going to kind of follow in order for the next several months. It's kind of interesting if you look at like the NIV, look at the text and you see what are the, what is the longest book in the Bible. You see that the longest book in the Bible is not Psalms. Most people think it's Psalms. He's thinking, and it's even different in the original. I kind of eliminated that. The Book of Kings is actually the longest book, and where's Jeremiah? Jeremiah is close, but the Book of Kings is actually the longest book of the Bible, kind of thing. We talk, well, it's the longest book, Psalms. No, so all right. Any questions? Still trying to figure out what the timing is here because I don't think they're out yet. But all right. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. And if you miss a class, again, at the bottom, I'll try and have the handout up there and a link. I can't put this on I have to like edit this part out because I don't have the copyright on that. I'll put the link to it in the description, kind of thing. Yeah. Yes.
My sister bought a book where somebody literally printed out all of these. I mean, it's a giant format, of course, and I have no idea how much it costs. But
Yeah.
you can actually buy the entire Bible printed and bound up
With those.
Wow.
Yeah. But this is just the Bible Project. Bible Project video. It's on your handout. It says watch Bible Project video. If you go to the Bible Project website, they have several hundred different. We're just looking at the Bible books, kind of thing. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for coming. See you next week. We're talking about Genesis. Yes.
That was really great.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.